Right. Albert Modi?
Thank you very much, colleagues. First of all, I must say it's quite amazing how the speakers today showed us that AI is not just about science, engineering, and technology. I really appreciate the presentation by the colleague from Rhodes, who made it very clear. I'm a social scientist, and I can articulate this. I think the issue of universities in South Africa is very important. I wish their director or their board members would listen. I still ask the question that I asked yesterday. Do we need a new kind of university? If you listen to the presentation by, I think it was Krish, where there's a collaboration of different universities to address the issue of AI, it appears to me that we actually need to have a significant shift in the way all universities in South Africa operate, particularly those that are funded by the state. And then lastly, Vinesh, you make a very important point about everybody moving forward. I mean, look at universities. In my university, we normally get 100,000 applications, and we need less than 10% of that. And so how many students want to go to university and they will not go to university? Imagine if AI was taken advantage of. These people will still be useful to the economy. Again, if I was a president of the country, I would ask myself the question, does everybody need to have a degree in order for them to participate in the economy? Thank you very much.
Indeed. Would you like to respond to that, Finish?
Yes, Albert, fantastic points there. And I second your view. And my opinion on this whole education thing, Albert, is I think the universities, and this is a controversial view, not a PwC view, my personal view, is that if they do not adapt to the new dynamic and paradigm shift, universities will be rendered also obsolete. Because I've spoken to a number of employees, and I come from the industrial automation and control industry, and we've been automating things for the last 50 years. And the universities are not producing the right students for us to use in the industry. So what employers are now doing is they're looking at people with practical knowledge. One employer told me they'd rather take somebody with 15 Udemy certifications who can practically do a job than somebody with a 4-year degree who has to be trained from scratch. So your point valid, Albert, that degrees may become obsolete in future because we want people who can actually hit the ground running when they leave a tertiary institution. The NITP is a fantastic example of such a program, and they are now evolving that to other industries. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the NTIP, sorry.
No.
The National Tooling Initiative Program, that's how it started off over 16 years ago, where there was a shortage of toolers in South Africa for die makers, and they went and developed a program with 3-month quarterly modules. It followed the German model where you study for 6 months, you work for 6 months to get practical and theoretical training. And then you then get credits as you move to the process. So even after your first year of work, you are useful to the employer. And they had 100% uptake of the people from the output of that program versus, I think, like 40% from universities and TVET colleges, because it was such a practical way of doing things. They had master artisans from Germany and even the US guiding the program development. And this is what we need in South Africa. We do not have very practical ways. We have a very theoretical way of teaching our people. And for employers in the current tough economic environment, to spend 3 years training somebody like how I was trained by my first employer way back in 1995 is not economically viable for them because, first of all, people move around much more sooner than much more often than my generation did. But secondly, this may not even have the budget to invest in this in that, and particularly SMMEs, they need people who can add value from day one.
Right. Very interesting. Gosh. I'm sure people who are from universities in the audience are cringing at the moment, and it'd be good to hear some reaction. Okay, I'll go to the chat and see what is there. Delport on Flee says, I read an article in Bloomberg on the 15th of March about the deployment of AI to PwC lawyers. What was the uptake and results in productivity after the deployment?
So I must apologize. That's not part of the business I come from, but what I can answer is that at PwC, we have all been over the last 3 years to upskill ourselves digitally. Everybody from our partner right down to the foundationer, which is our management trainees, and we have all been asked to become digitally fit using UiPath, Power BI. We learned how to configure those things, so we remain relevant in the future. What we are planning for, and what I can comment on, is that in future, in the audit part of our business, which is the largest part of PwC's business, is South Africa in particular, we will no longer have sample audits. We will have 100% audit done by technology, with exception reporting being done on what, and only 1 or 2 people then required with very deep experience and to analyze those exception reports to give an audit opinion. No longer will we need thousands of audit clerks going through paperwork and analyzing information. So that is what we're preparing our business for this disruption, because we will be disrupted as well. And we're even looking at how we can use AI in consulting now. There was a conversation our leadership had 2 days ago, because we all need to keep track and keep up with what's changing to remain relevant. So I would assume the same thing's happening in the lawyer side of things, because that is where you can automate, because you need to have a full access to the law and the jurisprudence regarding that and see how the latest case applies to that. So it'll probably require less lawyers, and a few more experienced lawyers would then ask the AI to help them produce the content faster to do whatever they need to do, be it corporate law or criminal law.
Right. Wow. That's very disruptive, isn't it?
Yeah, and the thing is, it's, the only consistent is change, right? The only constant. So we have to remain relevant by, and we are professionals, right? So we have to do what we call CPD, right? Continuous professional development.
Yes.
And I think this is CPD for businesses, right? Because if you don't do CPD, you're going to become irrelevant.
Exactly. Wow. There is a question from William in the chat for the location of copies of these presentations. It will be on the NSTF website, which is nstf.org.za, and then you look for the discussion forums. My colleague Mankwe can post the link again in the Q&A. Daryl Morris says, when I left school in 1970, the technical colleges had the system espoused by Vinesh, practical and theoretical studies combined. My friends went to study theory for 3 or 6 months and then did practical vocational training at their specific trade. Why that changed, no one knows. Avella Jojo says, indeed, us from the university, it's time to rethink and see how we can catch up so that we're not left behind. Delport says, excellent, this is the future of auditing. Olotoyin Olaitan says, I believe very strongly that the disruptive power of AI can only be good for higher education. Generative AIs will force the hands of education to imagine assessment practices, and questions will continue to emerge about the use value of degrees. Hence, the onus will fall on educators to prove the point.
I'd like to comment on those, Chair, if you don't mind.
Yes, please do.
So most universities have got an advisory board of some sort where they ask industry players to tell them what the needs of the industry are. We as the SIMC, I'm part of the EXCO of the SIMC, the Society for Automation, Instrumentation, Mechatronics and Control. And we have these interactions with various universities, particularly those in KZN where we have stronger ties. But somehow the message doesn't land, or there's too much inertia in the system. And that's where we need agility in the higher education system, because even though industry is talking to what the needs are, we are the customers of, as I'm talking with my industry hat on now, we are the customers of universities, and we have to take their product and use them in our businesses. But their products are not, I'm being very, very controversial now, are not necessarily fit for purpose. Those products have to be repurposed by the buyer of the product, add more value to the product before it starts producing economic value to the business. And that's where the paradigm needs to shift, where we understand I'm a BSc university graduate. I was very theoretically taught. I didn't know much about instrumentation when I landed at the first sugar mill I needed to work at, and my employer had to train me about all these things. So we're not saying, yes, everybody needs to be to that level of practicality, but you need to have people who add value from day one, be it at the BSc level or at the artisanal level, where they can help create value for the client and not the client having to invest even more time and resources in somebody who may or may not stay with them for 1 or 3 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, no, that is very important. I think we have to take that into account. The universities will always be important for higher level skills, but the fact of the matter is that not everybody is interested in pursuing the academic route to postgraduate level, and it's not useful for the country either. So very interesting. Mankwe, do you want to ask a question?
No, I just wanted to let you know that Prof. Borges is back in the meeting. If you want to address the question that was asked for him.
Okay,
thank you very much, Mankwe.
Chair, before you get to that question, I just want to make a comment on what you just said. Yeah, I think there's two issues, right? You just mentioned that people may not want to do doctorates and BScs. That's one way of looking at things. But the other way is certain jobs are stigmatized as being less attractive, as I mentioned in manufacturing, right? Being an artisan, an electrician, or even a fitter, a millwright, or whatever, doesn't have the same level of prestige that being a lawyer or a doctor or even potentially engineer may have. And we need to start breaking those perceptions, because we need those skilled people. We're losing a lot of skilled people to our countries like Australia, etc., because you need those people to make things happen. And those are well-paid jobs. Few may not know that, but I heard an interview on the radio where a CA in doing articles was earning less than these at a Sasol plant than one of the mechanicians there. So we just need to somehow change the PR and the messaging around artisanal skills so it becomes more attractive to people, because that's how we're going to build our economy.
Absolutely. Yes, that is a huge change in culture that I hope we can make some progress on. Thank you. So I'm going to go on to open up questions to Professor Borges, who is a visiting professor at UJ and is based at Saarlanders University in Germany. If there are any questions there. Okay.
There's one question in the chat, actually. Are we developing legislation in South Africa similar to the EU legislation?
Yes.
That's a question I'm unable to answer.
You're
answer
unable
properly.
to answer
Properly, as far as my colleagues in UJ tell me, it is still unclear which step the South African legislator is willing to take. So far, there is no legislative project, as far as I'm informed. But I think today's forum is serving at opening the floor for this debate. But that's only second-hand knowledge I have here, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
So there's one question, I'm reading it aloud. Prof. Borges, can you provide insight on the enforceability of AI legislation? Seems like the onus is on the tech companies to conform, if I understood your presentation. Well, that's a tough question, interesting and important one. We have to distinguish again. That's what we do in law. First of all, when it comes to the AI Act, that will be enforced mainly by public authorities. According to the AI Act, each member state will have to establish a public authority monitoring and surveilling the compliance with the AI Act requirements. And these authorities will have important power investigative powers, and also there's a possibility of fines. And the fines, the framework for fines is very high, up to 4% of the annual turnover of a company. So like in the case of the GDPR, the data protection authorities, the authorities will be equipped with enough power to enforce.
Right.
Regarding liability, there's a different regime. Here we do not have a public surveillance, public authorities. Instead, by filing a claim with the court, each claimant, so each victim of an AI system, will be able to enforce the compensation herself. So there are different regimes for enforcement, both very powerful, I think. Probably there is a potential for enforcement under the regime. There's another quite provocative question, comment. Law is inherently biased. Do you accept that there's likely going to be a serious conflict between the law and science regarding how lawyers interpret AI-related crimes? Well, I don't know what an AI-related crime is, and I'm not sure whether law is inherently biased, to be honest. So I'm not able to answer that question. Certainly, there will be much a debate around the interpretation of the law, as we always have, and that is a big problem for industries. I mean, what industry really needs is clear-cut legislation. If there's too much discretion to the courts to interpret it, then that is a problem for industry. That's what our European industry is requiring. Therefore, it's very important for the legislation to be as clear as possible. That's also in part of the debate. For that reason, what is interesting to note is that all the three legislative acts that I mentioned in my presentation try not to use general clauses. And that's really, really important. For instance, if the legislator will introduce a special provision on liability for AI, it's very important not to describe it via a general clause, but rather refer to a so-called list-based approach, which means that the law makes reference to a so-called gray list of AI systems, which can be updated regularly by the legislator. In Europe would be the Commission, which clearly states what kind of AI systems are to be understood as high risk or being high risk or just be under the act. And that's important to understand. Traditionally, and I think that's also true for South African law, the law contained very broad principles, and it was on the courts to specify the principles in the case-by-case approach. That works well, however, is not the way of legislation which is advisable for rapidly evolving technologies. We have the same discussion here in Europe. We traditionally followed the same route, but more and more we go we turn away from the traditional way of legislation into something more modular, faster, more specific, just in order to guarantee that the law can keep up with the evolving technology.
Right.
So from a comparative view and from a more methodological aspect, it's very important to understand that new technologies also require new approaches in law. That's actually my focus of my own research, and I completely agree. If I understood that remark in that way, I completely agree that we really have to rethink the law itself in this era of new technologies. Sorry for talking a bit longer, but that was a very thrilling and important aspect in the discussion. Thank you so much.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. That is extremely interesting, because there is a suspicion among the general public about laws in South Africa. And I think it comes from the fact that we only see the laws once it's interpreted in court. And then, of course, there's bias that comes in the interpretation. So that is very interesting, that it will be more specific in the case of AI, and it will be more easily adaptable. I mean, presumably it still goes to Parliament every time you make an amendment.
No. Actually, no. Actually, no. May I intervene? But just for one remark, the new technique of legislation is that the basic principle is, of course, expressed by Parliament. However, that the details, which cannot be updated by Parliament every 3 months, they have to be fixed by a government agency. And they very often refer to society or industry standards. So we very often see a partly delegation of specification by making reference of the law to technical standards. There are also pitfalls in this, but that helps a lot in keeping up, since Parliament is not able to come together every now and then to make an update of technical requirement. That's never the case. Also in Europe, you would not rely on such approach. So the law is making reference to technical standards in various big cases, and the courts still have their hands on the general principles, but for the technical details, this is not in the hand of a single judge sitting in a court. And I think that's the proper way.
That. Yes, that's a great relief to hear. I think, well, in South Africa, as far as I know, and I'm not a lawyer, but every time that there are amendments of any kind, even if they're technical, it is published in the government gazette, and the whole process goes through of public comment, Parliament, and cabinet eventually accepting or not accepting it. And in that way, technical issues actually become political. They become politicized. And the whole point of the exercise gets revisited every single time. That's what I'm seeing from the outside the legal practice. But thank you. That was very interesting indeed. Albert, is your question answered?
Well, Prof, I don't know whether I should say summa cum laude. It's amazing how you said you can't answer the question and then suddenly you turn around 9% of the answer. You know, as a scientist, the point of saying that law is inherently biased is that to us, when a lawyer goes to court, they are there to defend or to defend. Do you understand? But as a scientist, if I say a certain chemical compound does something in a plant or an animal, and I publish that paper, someone in Belgium should be able to repeat that experiment and show the truth. If I don't, then I guess I have to be wiped out of science. So it is from that perspective of a scientist that I made that statement. But well done in your answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Albert. Dartmouth College says, will lawyers need to be trained on technical terminology to be able to argue cases correctly due to the very specific language use?
Yeah, in the training of lawyers, we will introduce new elements. We actually starting at our university to introduce an introduction into technology, including of AI, in the education of our lawyers, even though this is quite unusual for law in our country. But we are aware that lawyers need a basic understanding of technology, in particular information technology.
Peter Steenekamp asked this morning in the Q&A, he said, I disagree that we must regulate self-driving cars, AI technology. The debate surrounding the regulation of self-driving cars often raises concerns about car manufacturers prioritizing the protection of their vehicles over the safety of pedestrians. However, this argument overlooks the fact that modern self-driving technologies, such as those developed by Tesla, are designed with accident prevention in mind. Moreover, the trolley problem, often cited as a philosophical dilemma, holds little relevance in the real-world design of self-driving software. Instead, we should focus on the alignment of interests among car manufacturers, the public, and the new owners of self-driving cars. One, primacy of accident prevention. The primary objective of self-driving software is to prevent accidents rather than prioritize the protection of the vehicle itself. Car manufacturers understand the importance of ensuring the safety of all road users, including pedestrians, and their technological advances reflect the alignment of interests among manufacturers, public, and owners should be prioritized to ensure safety without stifling innovation through excessive legislation. Overregulation can impede the progress of self-driving technology and hinder its potential to improve road safety and efficiency. Striking a balance between safety and innovation is essential to foster a responsible and successful self-driving future.
There's nothing to add.
Oh, okay.
There's nothing to add. Of course, over-regulation isn't something we should avoid. And of course, if the car makers follow the guidance given by the law, it's fine. I mean,
Right.
if actually what the law requires is exactly what was expressed by the comment. So that would be completely in line. However, the law gives an incentive to follow this route, and that's important as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So over-regulating, that's something we should strictly avoid. And there's a lot of discussion in Brussels, finding the right measurement. Some regulation is needed. The industry is asking for it. Industry itself is asking for regulation. And that's also very important from a company's perspective. The legal floor is making a playing field, which is adequate for everyone.
Right.
It does not provide an unfair advantage to someone who doesn't want to follow the general principles. That's why we need the backing of the law in order to make it clear to everyone that following what good science and good practice and interesting way is guiding us is really complied with. So,
Right.
and I totally agree, overregulation is the worst thing that can ever happen, but one of the bad things that can happen, we should avoid it. But don't forget, the framework is just the basis on which the industry can develop and give us the benefits that we're expecting from the technology.
Right. Are self-driving cars expected to be fully autonomous? Wouldn't there always be the possibility of human intervention, of overriding the self-driving mechanism in certain circumstances? And wouldn't that put the legal onus back on the driver, the operator, if you like, of this machine?
Actually, if you have a robo-taxi, there is no human driver. There is no possibility of intervention. However, according to the current state of the law, some human intervention has to be provided. In the German Road Traffic Act, it is clearly stated that even level 4 and 5 cars have to be open to human intervention. So that's how we will have these robo cars. However, the German legislator provides for the possibility of human intervention, which is, of course, only reasonable. But it doesn't have. We do not have to have a driver in every car, so that human intervention can be a remote one. This is the concept of the German legislator. Otherwise, we cannot really use the benefits out of the autonomous cars, since we do not want to drive ourselves. I want to sleep or to work, and if I have to be driver myself, I cannot do so.
Right. That would imply that there are jobs that are created with the remote controllers.
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
self-driving cars. Okay, that's good to get clarity on that. Delport asked this morning, if an AI car crashes into an AI robot crossing the road, who is liable and who will cover the damages? The human giving the driving authority to the car, or the company that developed the AI for the car, or the robot and its creator, or is the owner of each liable?
I could answer according to German law. With South African law, it's a bit difficult at the moment, since South African is fundamentally different from German law in this aspect. Interestingly, so the European legislations all have specific liability rules for cars, which intervene here. And under European concept, and that's different from Anglo-American approach. US and other countries are different here. Under German law, for instance, the operator, which is the keeper of the car, not necessarily the driver, not necessarily the rover, the owner, but the one who operates the car, and that entity will be responsible for any damage caused by any operation of the car, such as an accident. So in our example, under German law, the operator of the car would be liable for the damage caused to the robot.
Right.
Since robot's still tangible, it's property of someone. However, if the robot by its behavior contributes to the damage, then there's a that will be it also, the compensation will not be full, only partly. This is our general, that's the principle of partly compensation is also known in South Africa, to my knowledge, if the injured party also contributes to the damage. So in that case, we are in line. The only point which is different in my view, as I'm informed, is that we do have this very specific, strict liability for road car operators in Europe.
Right. Very interesting. Let me see if there are any other questions. I would like to also ask about the health robots used in the medical sector, such as remote surgery. Does the European framework address that at all?
Of course it does. It does. The AI Act would address it. It would certainly be high risk. But remote is not AI. So there we have to distinguish the current systems when a human person is acting remotely is not AI necessarily. But in the future, we might have AI systems doing surgery, and that would definitely be high risk. And also, product liability would address the producer of such a surgery robot if there's any flaw in the design of the robot.
Right. Okay, thank you.
There was a hand by Albert. I don't know if you see it.
Yes. Albert? Modi?
Sorry, Chair, I'm talking too much. This one is not directly related to your presentation, your talk, but my assumption is that lawyers study psychology. So you're going to correct me if I'm wrong. I've got a personal experience that when I grew up, I never touched a computer until I went to university, because I grew up in the deep rural areas of the poorest province of South Africa. When I compare myself with my kids and the kids that I teach at university, I see them being better than me in terms of having access to information quickly and using that information for the industrialized world. But I argue that the movement to AI, as much as I support AI, is going to increase the insulation of a human being from mental health related problems. Do you believe that a lot of problems could be derived from us giving part of our humanity to a robot and being more susceptible to things that will affect our mental health and therefore increasing the crime because we are no longer acting as full humans, according to the argument of those who are against AI.
Wow.
Yeah, that's an important aspect. AI can definitely influence people's mind. And that's one of the biggest risks associated with this manipulation by, or even self-manipulation by using AI. Just by way of anecdote, one of my young staff members, who's a brilliant student, did an interesting chat with an AI system, leading it very clearly to its limits. So the chat GPT went out quite poor. I made a record of this conversation. It clearly states how poor the AI at this moment really is. But the funny thing is, and that's really stuck me, is that the student, they said, I like this AI. Why? And I asked, why do you like this AI? He said, it was so polite. It appreciated my comments and did not say, hey, what are you saying again? It didn't criticize me like my mother did. So I really like the conversation with the AI system. I like these answers. I want to have more of it. And this is definitely can be a problem if you imagine that something is using AI in order to mislead people's thinking in a certain way, just because you start having an emotional relationship with the machine. And that's definitely one of the risks we have to address, including by means of the law. That's why I fully support monitoring by public agencies. AI can be misused, no doubt.
Yeah, thank you. Albert, before you come back, I'm just going to read a question in the Q&A. Gordon Branson asks, in the future, will the legal profession draw from philosophical questions and voices from researchers working in political philosophy, environmental philosophy, and the philosophy of technology? Or is there an expectation that an AI cyborg specializing in philosophy will be created to assist the legal profession?
Yeah, I'm asking ChatGPT for input on some question. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, the AI is such a good tool to summarizing a discussion, and we will use it, no doubt.
Yes. Yes. No, I'm afraid we'll have to keep philosophizing ourselves. Delport says, I hope South Africa follows EU law in this regard in the future. And there's again a question about the recording being available. Yes, indeed, it will be. Deshan Moodley, I would quite like to hear your comments on the future of South African regulations. Is it something that CARE will be addressing, the adaptation of legislation for South Africa, sort of looking into their legal issues?
So I do know on the ethics side, Emma Rutkam from at University of Pretoria, she's involved in the ethics side, but I think that's different from the actual promulgation of law and regulation. So I think in the digital space, so there is something else that I'm aware of. So I'm not I don't work in this area, so the view is certainly not an expert view, but there's for example, there's the PUPPY Act, which is probably more broadly applicable to privacy, but it's about digital technologies as well. And so I think in South Africa, the distinction between AI and digital technologies, that's also something should there be a distinction? And so what in case there's a tool that people that's helps autonomous decision making, but it's not AI in any way, is then the AI law is not applicable because it's not AI. So I think in South Africa there's like a digital master plan, but there isn't an AI master plan. So the question is then, is there an absence of an AI master plan or an AI vision and so forth? So I think there's some gray area about that, digital versus AI.
Right. Oh, very interesting. Thank you for that. Yes. University of Pretoria has been working on ethics in this space for quite a long time, I think, with digital IT, ethics of IT.
Yes, so I know there were symposiums with in terms of Poppy and the ethics of AI group in the Department of Philosophy. They actually lead the UNESCO task team for the ethics of AI, and I think they were instrumental in contributing to the UNESCO document on that. So I think there's quite a strong capability there.
Okay. No, that is good to hear. And
Yeah.
certainly we will probably be hearing more about this if we can just set aside our other headaches in South Africa for long enough to think about into the future. I'm sure that people will be addressing the legal issues.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make a comment on, not on the legal side. And I think it's I really enjoyed Vinesh's talk. But I think just a comment, I think going forward is, I think the thing that really worries me is, so Vinesh mentioned change, radical change, and we're all worried about this change. And but the thing that is worrying me that's remaining static and people are not talking about is it's a culture and a mindset change, especially the relationship between industry and academia and government. And that seems to be, there's this very silo attitude. I think Vinesh mentioned something, and I've heard this numerous times, that industry are the customers and academia provides a service to industry by producing graduates. And I think that's an old way and a very arcane way of thinking about things. It's actually a partnership. To look at it as a simplistic pipeline. And I think this adjustment has been made in the developed world, where there's a kind of partnership between industry and academia, and it's kind of tempered by government and an ecosystem space. And in South Africa, we're stuck in that way of thinking. And I think that also there's some attention that needs to be paid to that.
Yes. No, I hear you. I think that the Minister of Higher Education, Science and Innovation has also been looking into how TVET colleges can work more closely with industry, because the TVET colleges are a tough nut to crack for some reason. It is just they are not functional, and not properly, not fully. And we need the skills that they are potentially capable of generating.
Yes, and so to put it more concretely, to tie up a point that we raised earlier, which is that of course we know there needs to be in all the disciplines. I think there was a talk about the change in the auditing profession, the legal profession, but within the universities, in each of these departments, you need capacity to spend dedicated time to doing curriculum redesign. There is no fat in the system. And so really what needs to happen is, like, where do you get that injection of resources? I think if you speak to any academic, things have just you know, in terms of the workload, it's increased, so there's no capacity, there's not enough staff, and now all of a sudden you have to get another 20 or 30% extra capacity, and where do you get it from? And now this is where I think you need to get the seaters, the industry players, and then it becomes like a joint thing, and then we work together, and there's common resourcing. But those conversations, I don't think a lot of them are happening, and it'll take longer for us to put the effort into our curriculum redesign.
Right.
For restructuring some of the disciplines or rethinking and reimagining it. You need resourcing for that.
Right, right. Perhaps NSTF should have a forum on that issue.
Yes,
bring
and it's a long-term thing, and I think with industry, and we've also seen it. So by the way, I'm not talking about computer science. Every 6 months we readjust our curriculum. So you know, I'm talking about the other disciplines who don't have these kinds of rapid cycles of curriculum redesign, and so it's a resourcing, and this issue is economics, and it's long-term. Like, you can't have this, like, you know, industry, it's 6 months, we need you to change, to do this. It's a long-term thing, and there needs to be planning, and there needs to be a vision, and
yeah. Well, let's speak offline and see what the possibilities are. Professor Borges, thank you very much for your presentation this morning, and also for your enlightenment of us this afternoon, and for returning to answer questions. We really appreciate it, and we're all looking with great expectation towards the developments in Europe, and so that we can get our own processes going. And I think as soon as possible. I mean, I think if in terms of timelines, thinking of AI, I think this is the first step, the most urgent matter that we need to address. So much appreciated. It was very interesting to interact with you.
Thank you very much for having me. The pleasure was all mine. I really enjoyed it. Thanks to all of you. Thank you. Bye.
Yes, thank you, Prof. Borges. Goodbye. Right, Neil Crum, would you like to say a last word?
Yeah, just thanks, and I think I'd also just to say, to add to what was just discussed. You know, I was also working in engineering, and you've got not just one industry role play, you've got several, and everybody's got their own specialism. So who do you listen to? That's always that very, very big, complex question. But in future, I think AI is going to impact us in different ways. And I think ultimately we just have to take what we can from it in terms of positive affordances, but also be open to actually relooking what our assessment practices should and ought to be.
Yes. Thank you very much. Deshan, would you like to say a last word?
Yeah, I think it's. I'd like to end on a positive note. I think it's a very exciting time to be in this space, and I can tell you, I'm also older. Someone was talking about the new generation and the old generation, and even though I'm a computer scientist, I still I feel threatened by the young people who seem to be very familiar with all this technology. But it's an exciting time to be around. There's so many things we could do, and so I think we should harness this excitement and look forward and try not to be too scared. I think we need to be bold.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a wonderful note on which to end. To everyone in the audience, thank you very much for your participation and attending till the end. We've got 104 people still present in the Zoom. I thank you very much for your attention and your staying power. I'm exhausted at this point. I'm sure you are too, because there was a lot that was not just a lot of information, but a lot that challenges us in terms of the way that we think. with that, please, I want to urge you to please read your newsletters from NSTF, go to the NSTF website and see the presentations there, and their recording will be available as well so that you can revisit it. It was a very productive 2 days, and I think we've learned an enormous amount. There will be a media release, as I have said before, which will summarize the issues that have been raised here. So watch your inbox for that. You will receive a survey for today also. There was a survey sent out yesterday. Obviously, we do that to assess the quality and keep the quality of our discussion forums at a standard. But also we would welcome your comments and your inputs and suggestions. In the chat, someone says, Anel says, thanks for the informative presentations. Hope to attend more of the sessions. They are indeed eye-openers. That is a good note on which to end. And with that, I bid you farewell and have a good day and a good weekend. And we will connect again online. Goodbye.